Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews After Dark. Well, almost dark. Is a little bit of light out there, but I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Delicious. Not my usual setup. I'm in the process of moving, and we're taking the chance to visit family, and it's been very nice. This evening, I'd like to tell you about my most recent obsession. I have yet to discover another figure in history quite like him. He really is utterly singular. Today is Freedom is a Two-Edged Sword. Essays by the American chemist and rocket scientist Jack Parsons, published in 1989. This was a very kind birthday gift from my lovely wife Lynn. Thank you very much, hon. These essays were written around 1950, but they weren't published until long after Jack's death, so this book in part is fragmentary. This collection was edited in part by Jack's widow, the artist Marjorie Cameron. This is a rare book. Physical copies are expensive, but I'm sure if you look around on the internet, you'll be able to find at least some of it. That said, if you want to buy the book and you also want to support the show, the Amazon affiliate link is below, and thank you very much. There's a link below to an excellent Jack Parsons documentary by the YouTube channel Atrocity Guide, which helped inform this review very much. It was an excellent documentary. I was very impressed. You might want to watch it. I'm going to tell you the story, but it's a consolidated version because there's a lot going on there. A lot of moving parts in this one. But if you have not heard of Jack Parsons, well, I am really, really happy to introduce you to him because, man, this guy was something. This guy was something else. He is easily one of the most interesting people who ever lived. Jack Parsons was a rocket scientist who worked with a group at Caltech in California in the 30s and 40s, nicknamed the Suicide Squad because of their dangerous experiments. Jack was the chemist. He was the fuel guy, right? He never actually went to Caltech, he just liked blowing shit up. Then he turned pro. The Suicide Squad were working on JATO, Jet Assisted Takeoff, which helped planes launch faster by strapping rockets to them. And there's footage of this, it's pretty wild shit. During World War II, Jack made a major contribution to the field through the development of a solid rocket propellant that burned more reliably. It didn't just explode, right? So this was early stuff, but it paved the way for space travel. I mean, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, in part Jack's company, was eventually owned by NASA. It is right now. You know, this one kid who was blowing shit up in his backyard grew up into a young man who didn't have any formal education and just followed that instinct and changed the whole fucking world forever. I mean, that's amazing. So he's a genius, right? I mean, he's indisputable, almost indisputably a genius. And I think kind of reckless, you know? It was kind of like a wild guy. Like wasn't really about self-preservation. He was more about experience. So Jack Parsons was a limit experience guy, right? He was all about pushing things to see how far they could go, to see how much he could understand, how much he could experience, and how much he could figure out. And that is the thread, you know, the through line through all of his writing. So now, let's talk about the other side of Jack Parsons, which is why this book exists. Because there is the rocket science thing is just the surface, man. You know, that's just his day job, his real life. You know, what Jack Parsons would consider his real life, I imagine, was devoted to the occult. Specifically, Aleister Crowley's Thelema. He was a member of a secret society in California called the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO. He corresponded with Crowley, but never met him in person. Jack is frequently mistaken for a Satanist. He was not. He was an occultist, yes, but he was a Thelemite. It sounds like something you tent your house for. Oh, them dang Thelemites get through the walls again. Dang Thelemites. Can't do nothing about them. Lucifer is a symbol for them, but he's not the main point. They don't go around worshiping Satan. There's a whole pantheon of gods and demons, and it gets... I am not an expert by any stretch. I have barely scratched the surface. It is very complicated and incredibly nerdy. Jack is not evilly evil, or someone who wanted to do evil for the sake of doing evil. He's not nearly as sinister as people seem to paint him as. He's actually very compassionate. He argues heavily for liberalism in the book, liberalism of the day, you know. Jack was obsessed with the Crowleyan idea of the will, mankind's will, right? Freedom, the power within, and the power of the individual. That's what the word thelema means. It's a Greek word that means will. Their famous maxim is, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm sure many of you have heard that. But as the book tells us, as Jack informs us, that line means, do what thou wilt, so long as it doesn't infringe on another person's rights. For Parsons, rocket science seemed to have been a manifestation of this will. That's what's so damn fascinating about him. He practiced occult magic, you know, with a K, but he did something in the real world that was essentially magic. Alchemy. Up until that point in time, impossible. Because of Jack Parsons, rockets don't just explode. They fly. He changed the world forever, right? And even if we just say, oh, it was a lucky discovery or a right place, right time thing, sure, yeah, but you just start to wonder. Even if it was just, you know, he was that driven, that inspired by what he was working on in his magic practices, even if that just drove him to get there, right? You start to wonder. And the whole solar phallic metaphor of the rocket was not lost on Parsons at all, because, of course, he probably would have enjoyed Gravity's Rainbow had he lived long enough to read it, you know? He might have written something comparable, though it would have been less technical and more romantic. Wernher von Braun, the famous ex-Nazi rocket scientist who came over to our side after Operation Paperclip, and who was a character in Gravity's Rainbow, was described as the father of rocket science. According to author Richard Metzger, Braun once said that Jack Parsons was more fitting of that title. Braun was the one who created the V-2 rocket for the Nazis, which is the rocket in Gravity's Rainbow that the main character has a connection to. I'm not going to get into it anyways. You ought to just go look it up on your own. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses or wine and orgies, though I imagine there was a lot of that. Jack bought a mansion where other practitioners lived with him, and he started renting out rooms to the public because he left the rocket field and he needed to make some cash. And one day, a guy named L. Ron Hubbard showed up. Unfortunately, they became good friends, and then Hubbard stole Jack's wife at the time. They had an open marriage because of their religion. Then Jack began a very focused, intense ritual to find a mate, a partner, or rather, invoke her. He wanted to invoke a goddess. Very intense. That documentary explains it very well. He was like jerking off on magic tablets and stuff. It was all very tiring, I imagine. And then she shows up. That's the best part of the story. A woman named Marjorie Cameron came to a party at the mansion, and her and Jack fell in a tumultuous but deep love. Jack truly believed he'd invoked Cameron, and she had no idea. The craziest part is that, everybody in the house knew what Jack was up to. She had no clue. And so, she arrives, and everybody in the house is like, are you Babylon, right? Are you the Scarlet Woman? Like the Whore of Babylon, except for the Thelemites, it's inverted, so she's actually a positive figure. Eventually, Marjorie was like, she decided she was, which was very interesting, And she was a fashion illustrator. She'd been in the Navy. She was quite a personality. She was intense, fiery. Growing up, I watched the collected short films of a famous Hollywood occultist named Kenneth Anger, who was a legendary experimental film director. He also wrote an outstanding book on Hollywood myths and gossip called Hollywood Babylon, which I reviewed years ago. And I remember watching his 1954 cinematic depiction of an occult ritual entitled Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome, and realizing I was watching something completely other. There's a scene with a beautiful goddess with flaming red hair. That, as it turns out, was Marjorie Cameron. At the time she starred in that film, the widow of Jack Parsons. Link to the film below. The whole thing is set to the score of Leos Janicek's Glagolitic Mass, which is just gorgeous. And yeah, that scene with Marjorie is it's powerful, and in retrospect, very sad. So Hubbard swindled Jack out of about 20 grand, which in today's dollars would be equivalent to hundreds of thousands. After that, Jack was essentially broke. He'd sold this mansion, he'd cut ties with Crowley, who seemed like an asshole. Shocking, I know. Then Jack got in trouble with the FBI for being a suspected communist, and eventually was so down on his luck that he was pumping gas at one point. It was absolutely brutal, you know. It was a real fall from grace. But he got back on his feet. Cameron and Parsons were planning on going down to Mexico, and they were living at Jack's mom's house in Pasadena, and they were just about to leave. At the time, Jack was working in pyrotechnics in the film industry. In a rush, he mixed some volatile chemicals in a coffee can, and he dropped it. And it detonated, and caused the other chemicals in his lab to detonate, so there was a big explosion. Blew him up. The same day, after hearing that Jack was dead, his mother took her own life. Cameron later attempted to do the same, but lived. It is a very, very tragic story. I think those two women loved Jack a lot, you know. I think people really liked Jack. Just from reading his book and hearing the stories, I think there was something to this guy that was magnetic and enriching, even if eccentric, right? The dude was literally like all about love, like that, as he'll flat out state 1,000 times in the book. I mean, that was his whole thing. It's just one of those moments where you're reminded that death really is merciless. It does not care. You know, it makes no exceptions for the exceptional. And it's, you know, one of those moments where it just feels wrong. You're like, just like something's off in the fabric of reality. Like that shouldn't have happened. And there is quite a bit of speculation that that Parsons didn't die by accident, that somebody actually killed him, you know. There are no leads on that, but it is true that, you know, there were some issues with like classified documents, and he was eventually going to go to Israel, and there was, you know, there were people who disliked Jack because of who he was and what he advocated for. So possible, yeah, but either one is possible, honestly. I really don't know. But it does feel very mysterious. So Jack Parsons was something. I mean, really something. And there are books written about him, but I wanted to read the stuff that he wrote. I wanted to see what his mind looked like on the page. Okay, so now on to the actual book. With this book, we get an idea of Jack's philosophy and values. The main eponymous essay, Freedom is a Two-Edged Sword, examines the nature and importance of individual freedom and condemns repressive authoritarianism, whether it's communism or fascism or the church. Mostly the church. Jack vehemently hates totalitarian authority of any kind at all. Also included are essays on magic, with a K, and what Parsons calls the oldest organization in the world, which he refers to as the Witchcraft, which is exactly what it sounds like, ancient paganism. As we can see in this essay collection, Jack was a staunch individualist. He was an enormous proponent of freedom and autonomy. But he argues that in order to keep that freedom, one must be willing to die for it. Hence the title, Freedom is a Two-Edged Sword. Here's a quote from the essay. Freedom is a two-edged sword of which one edge is liberty and the other responsibility, on which both edges are exceedingly sharp. and which is not easily handled by casual, cowardly, or treacherous hands, for it has been sharpened by many conflicts, tempered in many fires, quenched by much blood, and although it is always ready for the use of the courageous and high-hearted, it will not remain when the spirit that forged it is gone. He also seems to highly value self-reliance. He was largely self-taught in rocket science. During a critique of dogmas in the book, Parsons reminds us that nobody, no person, no system of thought, including science, really knows anything. This is the strongest takeaway from the book, demonstrated by the actions of Parsons in real life. If you think you can't do something, if you think it's too hard or challenging, you might be right. But the truth is, you don't know. Nobody does. The following is a quote from the book. "The power of life is not restricted. It knows its own way, but no mind knows that way." That's true. So what Jack is trying to tell us is, to quote him in the essay regarding the witchcraft in the book, try and see. Go figure it out, right? That's what he means. It's very simple, and none of these ideas are really original. Parsons is just channeling old wisdom, kind of resurrecting it. We'll get into that. You shouldn't just be able to mix some stuff together and make rockets fly. You shouldn't just be able to do a bunch of weird shit in a ritualistic manner and have the love of your life arrive on your doorstep. But he tried, and he saw, and it worked. It's magic, right? And yeah, in one light, it has that kind of self-helpy quality, but Jack was not part of that ecosystem, right? Jack was a pragmatist and weird. He wasn't playing by the same rules of culture and society, civilization. He was an outsider. He was a very, very deviant guy, So taking all of that into consideration, it sounds like the same stuff you hear over and over, limiting beliefs, etc., But there's something about the way that he phrases it that is remarkably fresh. It's simple, right? It's very concise. It's very just straight to the point. And you've heard it before. But it hits differently when it's coming from a guy who has done what he's done. In his writing, we can see that Jack wanted to change the world because he knew he could, because he actually did in real life. And that is actually true for all of us. And I think we forget this all the time, but it is actually possible for you to do something so radical, it might as well be called magic. It is. For Parsons, magic was real. Real. Like, as real as anything else. One gets the feeling after reading Parsons that we are all aiming way too low. Jack's public persona is often sinister, but when you read his actual writing, you discover something surprising. He was entirely consumed with doing all of this out of the pursuit of love, understanding, and freedom, to use his terms. There's a heavy fervor in his writing, a kind of feverish passion that makes one wonder what state this guy's mind was in. And after researching him more, we can see that it was a devastated state. Not quite rock bottom, but damn close. Some parts are more reserved, but often he's just letting loose on a tirade against the authority of the church and state, and championing the feminine, which he believed Christianity deeply insulted, with the virgin birth and all that. He makes some good points. He had quite a bit in common with Freud, whom he must have read, as he brings up the ego and so on. Jack became disillusioned with science. He was driven by something much deeper. He wasn't just trying to perform spells. He was trying to resurrect what he thought was the oldest religion. Paganism. The religion of nature, which he holds in the highest regard. Matriarchal, feminine-centric paganism. He was trying to move forward in those terms and bring the world with him. Nature for Parsons is symbolized by the pagan god Pan. Before his rocket tests, Parsons would famously recite Aleister Crowley's poem, Hymn to Pan, link below. Imagine, if you will, a young man in 1940s California chanting the Hymn to Pan before igniting rockets. And this, in part, is what led to space travel. In part, space travel began with pagan ritual. Jack would recite it for his friends too. According to Wikipedia, he was compared to the preacher Billy Graham, in his delivery, which is very entertaining to think about. You ought to go look up some videos of him if you've never seen Billy Graham preach. He's a great preacher, if you're into that kind of thing. But it's impressive, just like objectively. But it's quite a, so it's interesting to think about that. And that's what Jack's essays read like. Sermons. He's like possessed, right? He's got the Holy Spirit of Babylon inside him. As we see in the book, he believed that religion was the only way to really change the world, as in change people. And as far as I can tell, he's right. That's why this new religion of AI is so terrifying. It's a shitty religion. And not because it's going to kill us all, but because it's like so fucking banal. It's just going to castrate everything, make us all like isolated freaks. A total worship of the intellect, as Jack might put it, which he was strongly opposed to. Not the intellect per se, but the worship of it. Whatever Jack was trying to resurrect, it was based at its core on the flesh, on love, on sex, which for him is fundamental, on human experience, and, as he's always writing, understanding. Here's a quote from the book. Of all the strange and terrible powers among which we move unknowingly, sex is the most potent. Yeah, it is. Always has been. Always will be. Is it any wonder that the decrease in sex correlates with the rise in AI? There's something there. I haven't worked through it yet, but I guarantee you, there's something really, really bad there. Because as Jack implies, sex is a huge part of love. He views love in a cosmic way as the unity of opposites, and he believed love is what leads to understanding. He explains it in the book. Although, not to my satisfaction, I'll admit. If we're not interested in sex and love and unity and understanding, what's going on with us? Seems like something's a little off. If there's not even the desire, we're fucked. If they continue to facilitate the technological isolation of the individual, we're going to lose it, man. There are similarities in the thoughts and writings of Jack Parsons and Camille Paglia in her book Sexual Personae, most notably the reverence of nature and the feminine. Jack goes a bit far, though, and doesn't take into account the darker nature of the feminine like Paglia, whose system is more sophisticated and developed, but she worked on that book for decades. Humorously, they have another strange thing in common. When they were young, they both blew up toilets. Yeah. Paglia poured a bunch of lime into a latrine at a summer camp, blew it up, and Parsons was expelled from a military academy for blowing up its toilet with a homemade explosive. Man, that's some shit. So what did I dislike? While Jack does seem very sincere and well-intentioned in trying to get his points across, the writing is vague. Serves me right for expecting occult writing to prioritize clarity, but still, There's a ton of melodrama and mystical, ritualistic empowerment lingo, to the point where sometimes it's like hanging out with somebody wearing crystals in Sedona, It's very declarative, aphoristic, close to a manifesto. But occasionally he'll drop a banger line. There are some gems in there, for sure. Enough to make the read worth it, and also enough to demonstrate that he was, in fact, a strange genius. Jack was a self-taught scientist who wanted to be a romantic poet, It shows. It sometimes comes off as a man using mystical broad strokes with esoteric language as a means of empowerment. It's declarative without sufficient explanation in many parts, and a lot of it is just the same ideas from older philosophers or thinkers. That said, in some areas you stand back and you're like, yeah, that's the truth. So it's far from nonsense, but it's elusive and surreal. It's preachy and the lingo is goofy, half-formed and too confident of itself. It's more assertive than seductive when it needs to be the opposite. He's kind of blown out the gate right away, right? He was a rocket scientist, so There are secrets about reality, and there are methods of understanding them. Science is a method, and so is magic. And understanding is what Jack was all about. It wasn't a desire to dominate others with his superior power. He wanted to liberate them. His writing has this overwhelming feeling of like, come on everyone, let's do this together. Not patriotic, but like, American. It was weird. Like this quintessential 1950s can-do American attitude, right? It's saturated in that. But it's like that combined with proto-hippie, the unity of opposites. Hey, plus a lot more sex. It's kind of sweet, like, yeah, you tell him, Jack, right on, man. Good for you. But you also can't help but feel that it might be the romantic idealism of a genius who felt deeply isolated from society. And it ended about as tragically as it possibly could. The life of Parsons, like this book, was incomplete. We can only speculate on who he really was and what he would have gone on to do. I can't even imagine. He was mysterious before, but he's one of the only authors I've read that became more mysterious after I read him. There are very few. Artaud was another one, but he packed more into one short lifetime than the majority of the full lives of all humans in history. Better than food-ish. 3.5 out of 5 coffees. Amazing author biography, like one of the best of all time, but the writing could have been stronger. I'd recommend it if you were really interested in reading what Parsons actually wrote, which I was, and I was satisfied. It was weird. I enjoyed it. It's like 1950s America can-do attitude plus occult paganism. So who should read it? If you like Freud, Camille Paglia, and Ted Kaczynski, check it out. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much to all my patrons on Patreon for making this show possible. I truly appreciate it. And if you'd like to support the show, the link is below. Please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and always remember, die reading. Alright, thanks for watching, have a good one, see you next time. Ciao.